Hello all, this is Dr. Sue from Purely Pediatrics, continuing on with our weekly content. This week we are going to discuss daycare and what we can expect realistically when we start daycare with our kids. Generally, it can be very similar expectations whether you start your child as an infant or as a toddler. It's going to affect you in some ways that I want to make sure you understand, because I've had many little ones start daycare this year, and it has been a very, very big struggle for the families. So I wanted to just kind of prepare families who are going to be starting daycare with their kids. You know, I had to use daycare for my children because I was a resident when I had my boys, so I needed to use daycare as well. Daycare has some wonderful qualities to it, and a lot of it can include the socialization once they're a little bit older. They can be around other kids their age. They can learn how it feels to be part of a group. They can learn how other people can react with them. They can form bonds with some other people in their lives too, like the daycare workers. So there are some really good things about daycare that I want to make sure that we discuss. The hardest part about daycare is that your children may be exposed to viruses that they have never been exposed to. And it can happen instead of a long, drawn-out process, which occurs for children that are generally not within groups of other kids. This happens quickly and can be very, very tough on the families. It can be tough on the children as well, because they are the ones dealing with the symptoms. But having a sick baby or a sick toddler at home is very, very hard on the parents as well. So when we start daycare, I want you to know daycares do have regulations, and that, there are going to be many of them that do require vaccinations. There are going to be many of them that follow rules very strictly. They are going to be making sure that they keep their regulations in mind and make sure that their workers do everything they can to keep the facility running and clean and have a very good reputation. So make sure that you know about the daycare that you're going to put your child in. Make sure that if it's important to you that they are regulated and they are paying attention to what they should be doing according to the New York State law. Please make sure to ask them those questions. There can be daycares that open, and that daycares that may not even be calling themselves a daycare, that are seeing children in a daycare-like setting. So make sure you do your homework. This is where your child's going to be spending a good part of their week. If you do daycare even twice a week, that's still a good part of time that they spend there. So do your due diligence, talk to other parents, see how the daycare looks. Go in and ask if you can do a meet and greet if possible, even just to spend a little bit of time getting the feel for the place that you're thinking about. And remember, if you do start a daycare, if you are unhappy, you can leave that daycare and make a change. So take a look at the daycare as a whole. Not only is pricing, it tends to be something that we do look very strongly at, which makes sense, is very realistic, but we want to make sure that our children are well taken care of too. Ask about the workers there too. If it's important to you that they do have training, you can ask about that. Whatever you feel is most appropriate for you and your family when it comes to your child is what I want you to really sit down and think about as you consider daycare settings. When we start daycare with our kids, again, as I said, we are exposing them to many viruses that they have likely not been exposed to in the past. I want you to expect your child to bring home these viruses and to be symptomatic probably pretty consistently every month for at least a few months. And sometimes it can go past that. And that's the worst case scenario. It may not always occur like this, especially if you have had your child around other children in a group. then they likely were exposed to some of these viruses. So what we see often is, just for an example, there is a baby that started daycare around 6 weeks. And unfortunately, this baby has had these chronic symptoms of runny nose, congestion, cough. Sometimes fevers are part of it, but generally fevers mean that it's a new virus that they've been exposed to and that they are trying to fight this virus off. What I always tell the families is, you want to take a look at the big picture with these guys. With your kids, remember that viruses are always worse on the first 3 to 4 days. Sometimes it can go into day 5 too. And it can take 7 to 10 days to fully clear a virus. This means the viral inflammation that our body deals with, what our body does is create mucus. So we're dealing with the fact that we're trying to get rid of this mucus and the inflammation caused from that virus. Little ones don't blow their noses well either, so that makes it really, really hard when we try to help them clear this mucus. Sometimes you can use the nasal suction or the nasal saline, which can be really helpful. I love nasal saline, and I know the kids don't like it, but I want you to know when you use it, it is a very safe product to use, and it helps to clear those nasal passages and bring that mucus down where they can actually get rid of it through their tummy. So kids with viral illnesses oftentimes will have mucousy stools because that's the only way they know how to get rid of that mucus, generally is through swallowing it. So what I want you to know too is that coughs are something that are not always an issue. It can be really frustrating, but coughs can be due to this inflammation, the postnasal drip. Coughs that do not come with respiratory distress symptoms, issues with drinking, or just general behavior where your child's acting like themselves, but they do tend to have a cough. That is something that I expect when it comes to viral illnesses. When I want parents to really make sure that they reach out to their pediatricians are, again, when they start to have new fevers with this cough, when they start to show signs of difficulty breathing, sucking in at the ribs, moving that tummy more frequently, increasing their respiratory rate, and not drinking. Drinking, little ones that can't breathe don't drink. So that's a really good indication of when they need to get looked at as well. So coughs in themselves are not a concern with a cold virus or a viral illness unless it becomes something that significantly worsens and creates an issue for the child with their breathing. Do not feel that you ever have to figure this out on your own. Remember that that's why your pediatrician's offices are there. They want to make sure they're able to help you. For coughs or runny nose and congestion that continue and seem to worsen and then start another fever, that's where I always want to make sure that we take a good look at the kids. You want to make sure there's not an ear infection going on. You want to make sure there's no pneumonia that could have been going on too. And remember that the majority of cases of pneumonia in children are viral pneumonia, which don't require antibiotics. But that's something that will need to be assessed by your pediatrician as well. So that is one thing I want you to remember. Symptoms that don't seem to clear, that the fever goes away and then comes back with the same symptoms without clearing, that's when I always have to suspect it could be those ears, or it could be another type of issue going on, such as a pneumonia. That's when I really want to make sure we get those kids in. Keeping your children hydrated is ideal. Making sure that they are drinking is the one thing I want you to make sure you focus on. The eating is not. It's the drinking I want you to make sure that you keep an eye on. If they're not eating well and they're not feeling good, just remember that the Pedialyte is ideal. Remember that you've got other types of electrolyte products that you can purchase to give them the sodium, potassium, and the sugars that they need. And those things can often be very helpful. If they don't like any of those things, remember you can water down juices. You can use things like let's see, we've got applesauce and watermelons, things like that are full of water and give them a good amount of hydration when they eat them. So I think that's really what I wanted to mention today with regard to daycare, is to be prepared for viral illnesses. Realize that there's times when we really need to be concerned, and there's times when we can just chalk it up to, oh my goodness, they're still fighting this virus, or that they've got another one. Little ones tend to get affected by viruses a lot. Now, the average illness, the number of illnesses children get on average are 9 viral illnesses a year. That's almost one a month. So for kids with daycare, they're probably the ones that make that higher end of that spectrum. I want to tell you, end this with some good news, that once your child is exposed to these viruses and these germs, that generally they do develop an immunity. So when they get to be school age, you might be looking at very healthy kids. My boys generally did very well in school. Of course, there were some illnesses occasionally, but they actually did very, very well. So when you do expose your child to those germs at daycare, remember there's a light at the end of the tunnel. If you do decide to send them to an in-school based facility as they get older, then they're going to rock it. All right, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I hope this was helpful. Remember, your pediatricians are always there if you need them. Have a great day.